swim, bike, and run. In the corner sun, we're gonna swim, bike, and run. In the corner sun, 2021.
Honcho Man, always great to see you, my man. Again, this is Breakfast with Bob, not quite Kona edition, and we are brought to you by Challenge Daytona, Hoka, Credo Tri, Amp Human, VeloFix, Four Seasons, Hualalai, Normatec Form Goggles, You Can, Canyon Bikes, and our Challenged Athletes Foundation. Our next guest, a longtime friend, one of the best race directors on the planet from Spectrum Sports, Mr. Mike Bone joins us. Mikey, how you doing?
Good, Bob. How are you? I wish I was where your background is being shot.
Beautiful. How goes on the rocks? I know we weren't able to do our show this year, and obviously, you guys, as race directors, when we talk about the most important link in the chain when it comes to endurance sports, it's the race director. None of this stuff happens without the race director.
Right.
And with COVID doing the damage it's done, especially here in California for race directors, what can you guys do, and what do you see right now is the future for race directors?
Well, I think the answer to that depends how I feel each morning when I get up. Some days are more positive than others. Honestly, what we've done in the last this has been very encouraging, Bob. In the last 2 months, we have, out of frustration and no road forward, started an organization called the California Coalition of Endurance Sports, specifically to rally race directors in the endurance sports market to each other's side and start working together to create a roadmap to reopen our sports. It's just incredibly frustrating, impractical, and there's no good reason that we can't be out there producing events. Now, we might not be able to be producing 20,000 person events right now in the current world that we live in, but everything we do is positive and everything we do is healthy. And we're trying to make our case in Sacramento and here locally with our state elected representatives and legislature to let us reopen.
What's fascinating to me when you look at what fitness is a huge part of keeping people safe from COVID, being fit.
Correct.
Events that are outdoors, that are naturally socially distant. So, I mean, you put on the Catalina Marathon.
By definition.
Yeah. As soon as you got 4,000 feet of climbing, 2 inches into the race, I'm socially distant from everybody there.
Right.
And when you talk about bike rides, you're not talking about a Peloton where people are sitting on each other. You're talking about people taking off at a certain intervals and being socially distant. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me why these events are not allowed to happen, especially we just had Ironman Florida and we just had 70.3 in Arizona.
Yeah.
And they've come up with the protocol. Everybody's following the safety rules. And you've come up with as a group, you guys have come up with ways to ensure safe events, correct?
We have a scalable program on our website to make it available for every company. We put it out there. Here's our foundational plan for COVID and how you can do it safely. It's been reviewed by San Diego Health and Reopening Task Force, Orange County Health and Safety, San Bernardino Health and Safety. Now, I'm not saying that they all approved it, but they each gave us input, and we're constantly working on it to make it better. So it can happen. And actually, this whole idea of the coalition came out of me being in Colorado and our friend Jeff Stoner putting together a trail race out there. And I went and asked if I could run. He happened to be out there the same weekend I was. And it was wonderful. It was a 10K out on trails and beautiful weather with a real live bib and timing chip and everything else. And I just said, there's no reason this can't happen in California. And there's not, frankly.
I don't think people realize that when you're talking about putting on events, you had events scheduled. Actually, Catalina Marathon was 2 inches from happening, right?
Right.
There was the weekend, that weekend of what, the 14th, 15th,
March
or something like
March 14th, and everything was shut down the 12th.
Yeah. So as a race director, how early do you start promoting that? I mean, you're spending money on t-shirts, bibs, medals, planning, permits, all that stuff a year in advance, I'm assuming. starting.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And that's one of, in our effort to reopen the state, and in fairness to the state legislatures and the people in Sacramento, they're not runners, right? And they're
Right.
certainly not race directors. And they don't understand, frankly, when I talk to them and explain to them, we're not a restaurant. We're not a business that can rehire our wait staff and our cook staff and be ready to go in 3 days. We're working on 6, 9, 12-month lead times. And until it's explained, once it's explained to them, they kind of get it, right? And it's like, okay, well, what can we do to get this going? So if you want an event in our industry, as you know, if you want an event to happen next June, we're already behind the ball.
Right.
We need to get going. And the difficulty is, without some reasonable assurance that if we go through the expense and the planning, that it can happen, we can't afford to go through the expense and the planning.
Well, so as an example, Catalina Marathon in March, you would already be promoting, right?
Oh, yes.
For a March event. And so you're taking registration now through March. And the reality is that at this point, you don't know if you can even have the event. So it's not, if they came to you March 1st and said, hey, guess, great news.
we couldn't do
the event. It's too late.
Yeah, we can't do it. And it's just the opposite, right, of what happened last year when some of the runners were wondering why they couldn't get a refund. Well, we had 1,000 shirts, medals, and food on the island because everything had already been ordered so much ahead of time. And it's just the opposite effect.
I don't think the average runner, I think the average runner thinks that every race director is some big conglomerate, that they're Ironman, they're Rock and Roll Marathon. Hey, I bought a ticket for this concert and the concert didn't happen, but I got a refund right away.
Yeah.
That's not reality when it comes to a race director, correct?
No, and I think if there's any positives, and I don't know that there are, but let's pretend there's some positives with the COVID situation. I think early on when this happened, there were a handful of really good articles that came out, published in both online and in magazines, talking about, hey, don't beat us up. Hey, here's who we are as race directors. Unfortunately, we've had friends like Renegade Racing go out of business. Right. And I think that really impacted some of the runners, frankly. I gotta say, when we first had to close events or cancel them, the calls were, you rotten people, you're stealing my money. Now the calls are, hey, before I register, do you think it's gonna happen? What safety guards do we have? So the Avalon 50 miler, which in the past couple of years have been up to 600 people, which is a lot for a 50-mile 50K event, happens in January. At a good conscience, we had to take registration down, but what we allowed people to do is to sign up on a wait list.
Right.
So now we're trying to accommodate the athlete, but not go so far that we can't put the event on if we feel like we're going to get permission to put the event on.
The other aspect from a race director perspective, and just the impact of these races, you guys aren't working in a vacuum. The reality is a lot of charities are dependent on the funds that are raised through these events. Exactly. Also, the island of Catalina, for example, for where you put on your half marathon and full and 50 miler, that island depends on tourism, and tourism is what the runners are coming over. They're spending money on hotel, on food. The impact of not having events, what are you hearing from these cities and these charities?
Oh, let me tell you, one of our biggest supporters is City of Avalon and also Visit Oceanside. Because, in Oceanside, the number one driver of rooms in Oceanside is Ironman.
Yes.
The number two driver of rooms annually is our Bike the Coast bike ride with 2,000 people there.
Wow.
So they're looking at it and saying, where's all the revenue going? Where are the room nights going to come back from? Catalina Island, the same thing. And that's happening up and down the state. You mentioned charities, and we did a little survey of the initial members of the coalition. And our estimate, which I think is maybe very conservative, is that on an annual basis, these events in California are generating in excess of $70 million a year for charities. And that's everything from your little church 5K to a CAF event or an MS 150 or a Komen walk. I mean, and it's not like these diseases, these causes, CAF, the Challenge Athletes, has the same demand that they've always had. It didn't lessen with COVID. So where are we going to get the funds to help perpetuate those programs?
So what are you hearing from the governor's office? Because it's interesting, I'll watch Notre Dame football game Saturday night and there's 15, 20,000 people in the stands. At the same time, when they have football games in California, there's nobody in the stands. So it's like California, it's almost its own little island saying, we don't care what the rest of the world is doing. We're not going to allow anybody to participate in events. Are you hearing anything from the governor's office?
Not yet. Some of our associates at the California International Marathon did talk or are talking to the governor's office, but the restrictions they put on that event were such that they ultimately decided it wasn't going to be the same experience, and they couldn't make money at it. Right now, our number one priority with this coalition is to get our industry recognized by the governor's office. We're right now lumped under sport, right? So
right,
we can't do an event until USC football can have fans in the stands. Well, the point is the athletes, and in those cases, the participants are the athletes, and they're still competing. So why can't we? So we haven't had much luck with the governor's office, or much of a push yet. We've kind of been keeping our powder dry till after the election. And I do think this presidential election is going to change things with Newsom. I mean, the reality is, right, you can't do all these programs you want to do without some kind of tax revenue and sales tax revenue. And we can't get the country back working with California sitting on the sideline. So I just don't know the best way to go about it, and not to be discouraging about it, but it's not the science and numbers, right? Because other states have proven that you just mentioned, other states have proven that they can open and operate these events safely and successfully, the same as amusement parks. So there's some other reason Newsom is not letting it happen.
So from a race director's perspective, it's one thing for, say, things start to open up with underneath COVID type of rules. If you have an event, you have an event and you've got 500, 600, 700 people, and you normally can have 1,500 or 2,000. You normally would take 2,000, but because of the COVID rules, you have to cut back a half or a third or 2/3. The reality is, as a race director, if you can take a third of the people, you still have to pay the same thing for permits. You're still paying for shirts and for everything else. I'm concerned about the financial viability of an event director trying to put events on under COVID rules.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really difficult, right? And not the least of which is that historically, I've been doing this for 20 some years. Every time the economy takes a hit, the cities raise their fees.
Yeah, right, because they're trying to figure out our revenue streams.
Yeah, all of a sudden, an event permit fee goes from $100 to $300, and you ask why, and they say, pay it.
Because you need us. Yeah. Where are you going to move Super Bowl Sunday? Right?
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to hit that problem. I think everybody's going to have their own criteria and matrix on that. Now, having said that, though, there are cities like back to Oceanside and Catalina, where they've said, hey, when your events come back, we're in. We're going to be there to help you. We need these events back in our community. So I think the historical events that are used to be going on in each of the communities are maybe going to be okay for a year or two. Eventually, we'll have to pay the piper. But you look at something like the Redondo Beach Super Bowl run that we've directed for 12 years, and 6,000 plus people there, plus people shoulder to shoulder at the beer garden. If that can't happen, is there enough money to pay the bills there? I don't know.
Well, and that's the other thing. Talking to the folks at Ironman, they just realized, okay, from a COVID perspective, where are the hotspots? The hotspots are when people are coming for registration and pick up their packets. It's the beer garden, it's the expo, it's the award ceremony where their groups huddle together. You eliminate all that. Does that take away from the mystique of going to an event rather than just walking out your door and doing a run on your own?
Yeah, I think, the last several years, the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's the whole direction in our industry has been the runner experience. That's what we've
Right.
all been focused on. The years that we directed the Disneyland half marathons, the Run Disney events here, it was 100% about the runner experience.
Mhm.
Um, and we've kind of nurtured the runners that way. That's going to go away. It's going to go back to, I don't see any other option, at least initially for the next short period, 12 to
Still there,
18
Mike?
months. It's going to go back to what, the runners taking care of themselves.
Wow. And so it's California Coalition. It's basically CA Coalition Endurance, enduranceport.com.
.com. Yeah.
Okay. And have you gotten good feedback from race directors throughout the
Oh,
state?
yeah. No, we have, I think we're 60, 65 people now of all events. We just, Ironman jumped on board enthusiastically. We have Spartan Trail on board enthusiastically. LA Marathon's been there from the beginning. San Diego Running Company, San Francisco Marathon, California International Marathon. So heavy in the running, but everybody's joined together. And, Bob, you've been in this sport a long time too. One of the cool things that's really has happened is that maybe for the first time I can remember, race directors are working together on this, because the reality is in the past until March, I didn't really care if the guys in San Diego got permits or not. I was only worried about my permits.
Right. Right.
Now, all of a sudden, we're all worried about it and we're all working together. And I've developed communication and relationships with some of these race directors. And I've been doing this 20, 25 years, and people I kind of knew, but didn't really have a relationship with. And I think it's been recognized in California, and I would argue nationally, that we need to do a better job showing ourselves as an industry and not a bunch of one-off event companies.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the positive is, and we've seen for years, you'll have two great events on the same weekend, right?
Yes.
And people are always put in the position of which one do I do? And they both suffer, both events suffer.
Yeah.
So more communication can lead to, also the other thing you guys can be doing as a group is doing more pitching to sponsors. Hey, stay in the state of California, support our whole group of running events that are in your region. So,
Sure.
it seems
Yeah.
like there's going to be some positives that, hey, if there's any positives that come out of this, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, and I think also working together, right? There's kind of that old school way of looking at it where Greg Klein, Jonathan, Jeff Stoner, and I would work together, but not some of the newer companies maybe. But now we're kind of talking and saying, let's promote each other. Let's get the events back and let's promote each other's events so that people come back and they know we're safe and they know that there's some standard procedures, because what's good for one race is good for the other. Let's get back and bring the participants back.
I also look at if I think there's more awareness now that if I'm an age group runner or a triathlete, a lot of times I think we've become fairly spoiled. Like you said, it's all been about the runner's experience, the triathlete's experience. Well, the fact that it's about their experience, it's, hey, which event do I want to choose? I've got all these different running events. I can stay local, I can travel, I can do this. When they go away, all of a sudden the races become more important to us. Has it surprised you that maybe people who felt a little, who were a little spoiled, now are reaching out and going, listen, I want a race. I don't need the frills. Just give me a race, give me a bib,
Yeah.
timing chip, and let's go.
It has, because some of those people are the biggest pain in the rear end in normal years.
Yes.
Some of the people I've heard from, and I love all my participants, but some of the people I've heard from on Catalina were the ones that would say, well, that mile 16 was 3 feet off where it should have been. And how come we don't have more at the finish line? And criminy, and now they're just constantly saying, please, can it happen? I just want to come over there and run. And,
Yeah.
we've all had a little setback, and, we're in industry. We need to work together, race directors and the participants. And there's not Spectrum Sports participants or there's a pool of participants. We all need to take
Right.
care of those people for our own business. And hopefully they'll be loyal to the race management companies that stick around.
And I think there is more awareness from the athlete now that these are small companies. These are small independent companies that don't have, it's not like they can afford to go a year or 2 years without having revenue come in and make it look like business as usual. That these are, I've received a fair number of resumes from race directors who are looking
Yeah.
for jobs because they know that their business is gone. I know the guys from Cause Events, they have a winery business now. And just
Yeah.
so in case their events are not able to come back, you just never know. It's
Yeah, how many of those
it's a tough
people are going to
time.
go find another career path and just not want to come? I mean, what we do is not easy.
No,
You know, it's not, it's hard work, whether you're out there doing the physical labor or the accounting, whatever part of it. This is a tough environment, and you're always subject to that day's registrations. So how many people are just going to say, you know what, this job selling shoes looks pretty good, I'll just stay with it.
hey, Mike, thank you for the fact that you looked at this and realized we need a group. California is a different entity. We need to work with the runners, the running events, the triathlon events, the cycling events. We're all the obstacle course races. We're all really under the same umbrella, and to make sure we don't go away, to make sure that we're still here, because it's you. At the end of the day, this is entertainment. We're in the
Right.
entertainment business. You're creating events to create entertainment and an outlet for people who have been stuck in their houses for 6 months. And more than ever before, events are important. And what you guys are doing, if people want to get involved, just go to CA Coalition Endurance Sport.com.
Yes, and they could sign up and they'll get our newsletter that we just started, and a lot of information on the website. We're just about to send out a survey to the members to do our best to generate an economic impact in the state, and I think we're going to be into the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, and also think about how many people are impacted in terms of, if you just took the numbers of people who participated in the events that
Yeah.
you guys represent. Any idea what that number is?
It's over 2.5 million on an annual basis.
2.5 million on an annual basis.
Yeah, pretty
Wow.
significant.
That's really
Yes.
significant.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike,
and
thanks for taking time. I know it's our first time doing Breakfast with Bob. And
Enjoyed
next year
it.
you'll have to join us in Kona.
I'd like that. And thanks, Bob, because you've always been such a big supporter of the race directors and what we're trying to do out here in the industry. And I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk about the fight ahead. It's an uphill battle, pushing a rock uphill, but I think we're going to be successful when it's all said and done.
Well, it's interesting from my perspective. When I had Competitor Magazine, right from the very beginning, we knew the most important link in the chain was the race director. Because when races are successful, then retail is successful, right? The reality is people aren't tuning up their bikes. They're not buying as many new pairs of shoes if they're not racing, if they're not participating in events. And then when retail is successful, then the manufacturers, Nike and all they spend more money in those regions of the country that are having a successful event. So it all starts with you guys, and race directors need to be successful for our business to be, for our world to function correctly.
Well, we're trying.
I love it. Mike Bohn has been our guest again. Breakfast with Bob. My name is Bob Abbott. Mikey, thanks so much for taking time.
All right, Bob. Thank you.